To say that Louis Zamperini lived a remarkable life is quite an understatement. It seems that everything he did in life was not ordinary. Quite to the contrary, it all turned out extraordinary. Louis was born on July 26, 1917, in Olean, New York, to Italian immigrant parents from Verona in northern Italy, Anthony Zamperini and Louise Dossi. He had an older brother, Pete, and two younger sisters, Virginia and Sylvia. When he was only 2 years old, the family moved to Torrance, California. During Louis' childhood years, he was a whirling dervish, incorrigible and untamable. When he was 5 years old, he started smoking, picking up cigarette butts while walking to kindergarten. At 8, he began drinking, finding and consuming wine left over in glasses used by his mother and father. There was no boundary of poor behavior he was not willing and eager to cross over. He would steal anything he could get his hands on, even freshly cooked food from unsuspecting housewives in the neighborhood. The police knew Louis Zamperini well, and his future looked bleak until he realized that he was hugely talented at running track. His older brother Pete was already a star on the high school track team. Pete encouraged Louis to give the sport a try, and almost from the beginning he and Pete realized that he had the talent to go far in the running world. He became a high school superstar, and in 1934 set a national high school record in the mile, a record that lasted 19 years. He then set a lofty goal of running in the 1936 Olympic Games in Berlin. He was swamped with college scholarship offers, but delayed entry in college to train for the Olympic trials. When he realized that he would be unlikely at age 19 to qualify for the mile in the trials, he turned his attention to the 5,000 meters event and began training like crazy to master that distance. He headed off to New York for the U.S. Olympic trials and to everyone's amazement qualified for the Olympic team and headed for Berlin to compete for his country in the 5,000 meters. Although he was young with much less experience and professional training than all the other participants, Louis managed to finish 7th in the Olympic race, an astounding feat given the circumstances. His final lap of 56 seconds was unequaled by any of the other participants. That final lap caught the attention of Adolf Hitler, who asked to meet Louis and complimented him on his finishing lap. After the Olympics, Louis embarked on a track career at the University of Southern California. He had now become a world-class track athlete and was almost unbeatable against his college opponents. He was almost assuredly headed to the 1940 Olympics and was peaking at just the right time. His dream of an Olympic medal was shattered due to the emergence of World War II. The Olympics were scheduled to take place in Japan, but due to Japan's invasion of China, it was decided that the events would take place in Finland. The Russians invaded Finland, and with most of their stadiums and Olympic venues in ruins, the decision was made to cancel the 1940 Games. The next stop for Louis would be the military, as a bombardier on a B-24 bomber as a member of the Army Air Corps. His military career and events that would take place in that career would prove to be a pivotal part of the history of his remarkable life. In August 1942, Louis graduated flight school and began his career as a second lieutenant at an air base in Ephrata, Washington, and was assigned to a B-24 flight crew. After training in Washington, his plane and crew were sent to duty in Hawaii. He participated in a dangerous bombing mission of a Japanese base on Midway Island and an even more harrowing bombing mission of Nauru Island. His plane narrowly escaped being downed in the Nauru mission, returning home with 594 holes from Japanese Zero fighter jet gunnery. Louis's luck ran out in May of 1943 during a search and rescue mission south of Hawaii. An American airplane had gone down at sea, and his crew was assigned the mission of search and rescue for survivors. Since his crew had lost the use of their plane due to the damage suffered at the Nauru bombing mission, they were assigned a replacement airplane that was known to be unreliable. Reluctantly, the crew took off, and ultimately the flight would prove disastrous. Mechanical problems doomed Louis and the other crew members of the B-24 bomber rescue mission. One engine of the four suddenly stopped functioning, followed by a second engine failure. A crash landing at sea took place shortly afterwards, dooming 8 of the 11-member crew to death. There were 3 survivors: Louis, his best friend and pilot Alan Phillips, and the tail gunner Francis McNamara, who went by the name Mac. What followed for those 3 survivors was 47 days floating aimlessly at sea, a virtual hell on earth. During the ordeal, there were many days in a row without food, water, or shelter. Occasional rain showers provided barely enough water for survival. They were successful in grabbing an occasional bird, which provided a scant bit of raw meat to eat, and used as bait on a few fish hooks that were stored on the 2 life rafts. It is amazing that any of the men were able to survive the ordeal, but 2 of the 3 indeed survived. Mac perished on day 33 and was given a burial at sea by the other 2. Mercifully, on day 47, they drifted into the Marshall Islands and were almost immediately spotted and captured by the Japanese who inhabited the islands. Even though one phase of their terrible ordeal was over, the beginning of 2 years of captivity by brutal captors was now just beginning. Survival was again the only goal for Louis and his best friend Phil. Although Phil and Louis were treated well during their first days of captivity, they learned that they were being taken to Kwajalein, known as Execution Island. Once at Kwajalein, things took a dramatic turn for the worse. Louis and Phil were about to endure the most horrific 2 years of physical and mental torture imaginable. Louis would endure hundreds of torturous beatings that almost no human being should be able to survive. At the last POW camp at which he lived, the most sadistic and cruel guard ever known chose Louis as his personal whipping boy, raining untold torture on him. It is speculated that he chose Louis to beat relentlessly because of the notoriety Louis had gained as an Olympic athlete. Louis was approaching death when the war ended, sparing his life and allowing him to live to the ripe old age of 97. Although Louis had never been a religious man during his life up to his military misfortunes, he had prayed many times during his days on the life raft and as a POW that if God would spare him, he would dedicate his life to Christian service. In 1948, at a Young Billy Graham evangelistic service in Los Angeles, Louis Zamperini experienced the saving grace of his God and became a born-again Christian and evangelist for Christ. The remainder of his long life was spent in the service of his God. It is impossible to do justice to the remarkable story of Louis' life in a short YouTube video. If you find this story to be as fascinating and intriguing as I do, I would highly recommend that you read the book Unbroken by Laura Hillenbrand. It is a well-written book that details Louis Zamperini's incredible story. If you enjoyed this video, give a thumbs up, click on the bell for notification of future videos, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. As always, thanks for watching.